Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome to the Dental Wealth Podcast. With me in the studio, as always, is the man himself, the magnificent Eric J. Morin.
It is an amazing, beautiful fall day here in Georgia, and it is cool. I've got a turtleneck on if you're not on video because I just decided that was fall appropriate. And I might find it quite warm around 3 o'clock, but right now I'm going for style over comfort, my friend.
It was 95 degrees in Texas yesterday, so there will be no turtle around my neck anytime soon. But you look sharp. You look dapper, sir.
Move to Dallas, they said. It'd be fun, they said. Yeah, Dallas, huh? No.
We don't get a lot of rain, which is nice because that's the one thing. I can deal with heat. I can deal with cold. I hate the rain. Like
really?
People that live in.
All right, so I'm aging because like every time it rains, I get so happy inside. I'm like, woohoo!
No, you can't wear certain shoes. You can't wear certain shirts. It's just a problem. I don't like
it.
The
plants in the yard are just thriving. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah. It's like weather, and then also there's been a big battle in the office lately. For the listeners, we've been talking about. And it's a great question for the audience. For any of you gentlemen listening, Eric has very strong opinions when it comes to flip-flops.
Oh God, here we go.
So, there's a couple of us that, we like, it's summertime, it's hot, we wear
crusty
flip-flops,
feet. Crusty.
Just about everywhere. And Mr. Morin always, he's a very big proponent of you should never wear flip-flops.
Unless you're at the beach or at the pool. Right? If you're at the pool, flip-flops go. One place that flip-flops should never be worn in a million years, no matter what. I don't care if you just walked out of whatever. Like, I'm telling you right now, do not wear flip-flops in the airport. If you wear flip-flops in the airport, that is I'm sorry, we're getting way off dental wealth, but I'm just saying that you want to know about, like, that's a pet peeve. I'm like, bro, nobody wants to see your nasty feet in the airport. No. Come on.
Even if you have TSA pre-check, global entry, all that, don't be wearing them. Don't wear them in the airport. That's a little obnoxious.
And then if you're gonna walk through security with no shoes on, you talking about that? I mean, they don't wash that. That's thousands of feet. Just bro. Oh, come on, man. That's bad. And then you go put that back on.
Yeah, I would say that in movie theaters. The people that wear their flip flops, they have the recliner seats, and then they have their feet all up on the seats. I'm like, nope. I'm out.
I can't do it.
I'm using a different row. I'm sorry, I got a reserved seat. I'm going somewhere else. I'm not going to sit near that. Nope. No, thank you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So anyhow, that's a complete side tangent. But yeah, I grew up in Florida.
Just giving you a glimpse into our day to day.
I grew up in Florida. and we obviously are the flip flop capital of the world. But I will tell you, and so sometimes it's 100 degrees, right? You gotta, I'm just saying, I get it. But I'm just saying, I don't know.
Texas, it's 105 in the summertime. So there's a good 90 days that I wear flip-flops constantly.
Well,
So it's socially acceptable out here. I don't know what you guys are doing over there. But that gives you a glimpse into the office camaraderie here at Tower Leadership. One of our hot topics right now is it appropriate to wear flip-flops?
To flop or not to flop?
So if you're watching this on like Facebook or LinkedIn, put in the comments, answer the question, is it appropriate to wear flip-flops on a regular basis?
And here's the thing, every female is going to be like, guys should not do that. I'm just letting you know.
Some females shouldn't be wearing flip-flops either, but
that's true.
That's a whole different story. Back to the dental wealth, back to the seriousness here. So, you said you had something that you wanted to talk about today, so let's jump in.
Well, I've talked about the 4 upper limit problems before, and I came across one yesterday, and it's worthy of this podcast. And it's really the idea that more success brings more burden. And I was talking to a doctor who's an avid listener to this podcast, and so she'll know. It's okay. It's good, but I think all people need to hear it. Is that sometimes we believe that when we grow, when we become more successful, that that burden's too much, right? That might mean time, time we don't get for ourselves. It might be time away from family. It might be time, right? And so we sometimes hold ourselves back, and it's called an upper limit problem. It's an upper limit problem because it's a story. It's not true. It's just that we believe that to be true, right? And what happens is when we start hitting a certain level of success, we come back down again. Because we go, I don't want to do that. It's going to just be more headache, more problems, more, and so it's just not true. And I tell people there's 3 reasons why you grow a practice. 1, income, right? I just want more money. 2, valuation. I'm going to sell it and make more money. Or 3, revenue. And revenue is about scalability. Like, I've taken doctors and gotten them completely out of the dental chair so many times in my career. And so it's not, but you can't, well, I should say first, you can't do that if you're one doc and an associate. Like, you just can't do that. It's not going to ever happen. But you could remove yourself as you grow and scale completely out of the dental chair, right? You could show up once every month if you wanted to, if you grew it big enough, right? Yeah. So there's this idea that more success brings more burden is not true. I would argue that more success gives you more freedom. And yet we have doctors, and I see this all the time, by the way. I could give you 40 examples, 50 examples. I mean, of doctors who believe that to be true. And that and they might not openly say it, right? And by the way, these upper limb problems, like I was giving an example the other day about one of them is called the crime of outshining, which is I had a younger partner who didn't want to really overachieve because they didn't want to offend the other partner or make the older partner look bad. I mean, these things show up for all of us. But this is one that people need to realize. Like, and by the way, people listen to this podcast and they'll say to themselves, not me, I'm different. Like, I don't. And then it's interesting because when it pops up for them, I'll say to them, and I'll call them out, and I'll say, see, you thought that was just some concept I was talking about on a podcast. But you didn't know that was for you. And you didn't know when it was going to show up because he showed up for us all. And so when that showed up for her, I was like, hey, look, this is showing up for you. And by the way, it's not about that conversation. It's about any conversation, right? I want you to all think about this. Whether it be expanding, personally, professionally, home front, whatever, the natural thing to do, and this is scarcity versus abundance anyhow. Like, this is actually scarcity versus abundance. Abundance is really hard to do. It's easier to contract to live small if we wanted to, right? All of us could live small. We could all get a bicycle and Uber everywhere. We could all live in a 1,200 square foot apartment. We could all really get small. But even the idea of getting bigger than that is always abundant thinking. Well, I can make more. I could do more. I could build more. Right? So we do push that. We just push it to an extent to which we feel comfortable. But there's a limit to where if you said to yourself, well, I want to make $20 million a year and I want to I want to not work clinically at all, and I want to come once a month. And because if I have $20 million a year, for instance, if you're at $20 million a year, then what you could do ideally is you could have an executive team, right? Like, I'm just saying, let's just say you're at $20 million in revenue. You could have an executive team. You could have a CEO. You could have a COO. You could have CMO, CTO, CIO, and a bunch of other O's. And you wouldn't even have to show up. You'd have an executive team, right? If you were doing $5 million or something in roughly an EBITDA, you said, hey, I'll make $1 million a year. I'll put $4 million back into executive leadership, or obviously you don't need $4 million to do that, but whatever amount you want to look at, you wouldn't even have to work inside the business of the business, right? You could literally be the decision maker that comes along once every 2 weeks and says, hey, I like that, or I don't like that. So I would argue with everyone on this, listen to this podcast. And if you say, well, that's not me, it will be. If it's not today, it will be. I promise you, it will be you. I know that because these things always come back up for clients over time. And I always say to them, remember that one concept I was talking about? They're like, oh man. I was like, yeah, it's easier to talk about this stuff, but when it's you, then all of a sudden you're like, whoa. And so it's going to all be you. Everyone listening, it's going to be you at some point. And you'll say, no, it is. There'll be at some point where you say to yourself, well, I could do that, but it's just not. I'm too old for that. It's just not worth the hassle, right? I don't know if I really think that will benefit me. I mean, there's a ways we insulate this story, but the truth is that we could build an organization where we didn't work clinically, where we barely came into practice, and we made 7 figures a year. Yeah. So if that's true, then what holds us back? The truth is, what holds us back is the belief that more success creates more burden, that I'll have to work harder to get there. And that's not true.
No, I mean, it's partly how you identify as well. So if you identify as being just always going to be a doctor, I think the hardest part is getting doctors to realize you don't have to always be identified as a doctor. At some point, you need to transition into the business owner, like the CEO, those type of things. So when you get to, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 locations, you need to start changing that mindset. Like, you need to get out of the production role. You need to get moved into I'm going to run the business. I'm going to make strategic decisions. I'm going to make different acquisitions. You need to be focused heavily on that. And you have to get away from your own mindset of, I have to be this person. But also think with, more problems comes more opportunities too. If you're holding yourself back, if you're looking at it and say, if I get this extra location, man, I'm going to have to integrate the team. I don't have the time to do it. I'm still working clinically over here. How am I going to get over there? You're self-sabotaging yourself. Obviously, you need to have everything fundamentally done with your current practices before you go acquire other practices. But you need to look at the opportunities. What is that cash flow going to allow you to do? Just like, you just said, Eric, where you just start building out your team from there. Like, you need to say,
who, not how. Who, not how, right?
With this acquisition, how do I make sure it doesn't take me off my core focus? I mean, it's when you and I look at acquisitions, we always look at, all right, so is this going to take us off path of what we're trying to create here at Tower Leadership, or is this going to be something that we can bring in, drop into place, get them going quickly, and go from there? So you always got to look at who you're going to need for it. Like, are we going to have to hire, the operations director or a marketing director or all of these things to make sure it's running smoothly? If you're thinking that you're going to have to do everything, you're purchasing the wrong business.
Yeah, for sure.
You're going to self-sabotage yourself. And sometimes you got to let things go. I think the biggest thing that you and I deal with is like letting things go. Like, we're building a team so we can let things go. So as you look at your dental practice, you need to look at, all right, so what can I stop doing? Like, so if I go make this acquisition, or if we grow to this point, if we're 5 million now and we get to 15 million, what am I currently doing that I no longer need to be doing? And you need to start listing out these things, and then you'll start developing a team around it. I think people always, they don't plan for those type of things, and that's why they feel like it's going to be a more stressful endeavor. Yes, I mean, you're going to be making bigger decisions. I think, that's the thing you have to come to terms with is, yes, the decisions on a $2 million business are going to be a lot different than the decisions on a $5 million business. It's going to be a lot different than the $10 million decisions you need to make. One decision could cost you a lot of money, but it also can make you a lot of money too. But you got to trust in the decisions and don't get, paralysis by analysis. Sometimes you just got to jump to action. So if you feel like you're in quicksand, try to get out of the quicksand. Like, start looking forward. It's almost the end of 2024, which is crazy. 2025 is going to be coming. Start thinking, how can you do this? Not, is it going to be this? Is it going to be this? It's how can you get it done? And I think that'll set you up for success in 2025.
Not even just how, who?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. That's the challenge, is the who. It's like we go back to the how, and it's like, how am I going to get all this done? And so, because when you start thinking the how, you're stressed the hell out. You're like, I don't know, I'm going to work 20. Don't say you're going to work 20-hour days in 2025 and then you'll really be successful. Like that, don't do that. Just say, who would I bring in? It's funny when I talk to doctors about bringing people into the organization. They always say, how do I find this person? Okay, guys, you're killing me. Like, really? How do you find this person? Like, that's always the go-to. It's like, how do I find this person? I'm like, well, how do you find people? I mean, I'm not a staffing company. So that's not what I do, but I'm telling you what you need, right? And that might be the pivotal point. If I was to ask you, hey, we need to bring in an operations director to run all this, would you say, how do I find this person? Because if you would, I would argue like you're looking for boundaries. Because if you're already thinking next level, you were like, yeah, I can find that person. Like I can find them. Instead of being like, well, how do I find somebody who can do this? I mean, because that's in a sense creating an unnecessary boundary that doesn't need to be there. I mean, we have to do the same thing at Tower. We go find people. We just go find people. Like it's one of those things where you got to start looking, right? And and you'll find those people. But I think you look at who. I mean, I also say going into 2025, look, there's all podcasts, whether you listen to this or 10 other podcasts, understand something that's really important. We can give you advice over the podcast as general in nature, but I can't give you specific advice. Like I can't go, unless you ask me a question on the podcast, I can't give you specific advice. And there's something called stage conversations, and there's something called one-on-one conversations. In a stage conversation, I have to be careful what I say because people take the information that I say on this podcast and they run with it. So, but it can't always, I have to be careful because what I say, people will run with. So there are specific things that I might tell somebody one-on-one that I'm never going to give you on a podcast. Well, nobody will. And the fact is, when you listen to podcasts as your sole source of information, you're missing the meat. And so I can only give you so much because I have to be careful of what I say. So I can only give so much advice on a podcast where I would give you so much more. And I would encourage you about all podcasts. And so I would say also going into 2025, where are you getting advice? Are you trying to get it for free? Like, are you trying to just get free advice? And I'll say that to this. And this is coming from a guy who just cut $200,000 for coaching myself. So, I mean, I put my money where my mouth is. So look, I would say to all of you, like something to think about is like, and actually I saw this quote on, I think it was LinkedIn or something. I thought it was like one of the best quotes. Most people never become successful because they thought that everyone who ever tried to help them was scamming them. Or something to that degree, right? They were always looking for a scam, like this person's trying to get over on me. And because they were so worried about somebody getting over on them, they actually never took the hand who could help them, because the fact is they were so worried that somebody might take advantage of them or something might not come true or whatever. And look, in the consulting space anyhow, most of the reasons why things don't work are the doctors. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, even like, look, I mean, I think that obviously that what we do at Tower is superior to the marketplace, but I would still say when somebody comes to our sales team and says, hey, we've been to 5 consultants and none of them worked, we come back and we go, I don't think we want to work with this person, right? There, you got to tell me they gave you there was no advice that helped you at all. They were just, they were talking about football and they never gave you any good advice. Like, I just don't buy that. What I would buy is that it's like we were at a foundation, our 2-day, which is our initial into Tower. And there was a group, this table up front, and right away this, I think it was an operations person. She goes, I know most of all this. And I was like, oof. Oh, don't sign them up. Don't sign them up. We don't want to work with them, right? Right away, I was like, yeah. We're good. We're good. And sure enough, they didn't sign up. And I was like, yeah, they think they know it all. I mean, I already know this whole group thinks they know it all, which is why they'll never achieve their goals, because they think they know it all. And like, you have to be careful. Like the great Jim Rohn once said, like, he was like, when I'm in a seminar and he said, half of the room is like, man, my gosh, this is so amazing. I got it. And the other half is like, well, I've heard all this before. And he's like, why would somebody not grab great information? It's called mysteries of the mind. And my point of that is to say this, is that you don't want to hold yourself back. You got to realize more success does not bring more problems. It actually helps, but you got to bring in people to help you actually navigate those problems. And you can't be looking for someone to do you wrong in the middle of that. Even if you hear something you've heard before, it's not a scam. It just means that ultimately you probably need to hear it again and again and again. One of the things I even said to you, Matthew, we flew out to LA to see a coach, and I said, no matter what he says, what we will not say to each other is we've heard all this before. And the reason why is because you got to there's something you miss somewhere. Like if you come in and say, well, we're stuck at $6 million in revenue, it's like you miss something. You think you know it all, but you miss something. So one of the worst things a person can do is think to themselves, I've got it. I mean, there was a doctor. It was funny. My brain's going wild now. I'm like, tick, 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 examples. But like, there's this doctor, so funny. So this doctor likes to pay me one-off for things. And I don't do that very often, but he's someone I know. And so it's interesting. In 2020, so in 2019, I did some work with him. And then I was talking to him about 6 months ago. He's like, man, we just got creamed in 2020. We never came back. We've never come back from it. We're still struggling, and it's ripping apart our partnership and all these things. And I was like, dude, I'm glad you saved whatever it was a month. Like you thought you had all the answers in 2019, which is why you never fully engaged. And you never fully engaged, but our clients who fully engaged not only blew up in COVID, but they're like the same people who walked in the same room as him are now 10 times bigger than he is. But in 2019, he had all the flipping answers. He had it all figured out in 2019. He went to all the seminars. He had it all together. And now I'm like, bro, you still think you've got it. Like he will still, if you're talking to him today, will be like, yeah, I know all that. And you're like, no, you don't. You don't know it. You think you know it, which is the fundamental problem, is that you think you have the answers and you're missing it. Like what great thing to ask for a consultant, instead of telling them what you know and how smart you are, ask, what am I missing?
Yeah.
What am I missing? What is it? I mean, if you got a consultant right now, ask them, what are your best clients doing that I'm not doing?
I think it's too, I mean, the second part of that is if you keep hearing that message, like if you feel like you're hearing, I've heard that, it's probably on purpose. You probably need to hear that again because you're probably not doing it. Just like that, that young lady that was at the foundation workshop. Well, you should probably look at the situation and say, all right, they're telling me this for a reason. Like maybe this is, and this should be thought provoking to you. It should be where you go back and say, well, maybe we're not doing this correctly. Like I need to go look back at this. Like I get what they're saying, but maybe I need to just go take a look at this again and see if there's any way that we can do it better. I think, in a dental practice, most dental practices that we come across have been in business for 15, 20, sometimes 30 years. And if you haven't made significant jumps over that 30-year timeline, you've been doing something, like you've missed something. Like you're just flat out missing something. Even if you're not growing at a higher clip, like if you and I 30 years from now, even 10 years from now, we were in the same position as we are now, we would both look at each other and be like, we're doing something wrong. Like we're either just not listening to the advice we're getting, we're not trying to grow and expand, we're not doing, like something is missing. All businesses are the same. They are. I don't care if you're a dental practice. I don't care if you're an automotive industry. I don't care if you own a hot dog stand. It's the same concept. You got to get new patients in the door, new clients in the door. You got to take care of those clients, provide value, and get them to come more often. Like it's very simple in those terms. But now it's, okay, what advice can I take to help me grow exponentially? And if people are actively telling you things that you've heard before, you probably haven't implemented them. You should understand those things. Like, yep, I've been able to put these in place, but how can I go expand upon this? Like, let me ask questions. Let me say, okay, so I did try this in the past. Our practice is doing X, Y, Z. Can you give me some feedback on what I should do here? Instead of saying you know everything, why don't you ask a question about it?
Well, it's funny because those are the practices we always go into. When we go into, we're like, oh my gosh, they're a damn mess. Like the ones that have it all figured out are always the ones that are a disaster. And you're like, and then if the doctor's not willing to listen, you're like, oh my gosh, like you don't realize you're the problem. Now, we went off on a tangent about listening to advice, but my point is that the reason why I got into a tangent about it is like, look, more success does not drive more burden. It just doesn't. It's just not true. It's just that you're not implementing it correctly. If you think it creates more burden, if you think you're going to have to work 20-hour days to get things done, then you don't know how to implement the information, which is okay. I mean, we're all trying to figure out how to implement things in our businesses, including myself. But I don't want you to think like if you didn't get it done, don't say, well, it's them or whatever. It's probably just something you're missing. Yep. And there's a missing piece to allow you to scale with ease, without feeling like you're overwhelmed, without losing money, without, these things are just true. So don't create a story that isn't necessary, that, hey, look, if I do this, it's going to take me a lot more time away from my family, or it's going to take me a lot of time away from my friends, or I won't have time for myself, or I'll be burnt out. Like, don't do that to yourself, because I will promise you that it's not true. It's not true. I want you to think about, okay, how do I scale and challenge the problem a different way? How do I scale without creating, a situation where I have less time for myself, less time for my family, and I'm feeling overwhelmed? That's the question, right? Tony Robbins always says people just lack better questions, right? They just need to ask themselves a better set of questions. And so instead of saying I can't do it or whatever, I would say, how can I do it? Who could help me? I think one of the reasons we went off on consulting for a minute is because it's like, okay, well, who could help me get this done? And so you kind of go back and you say, well, okay, there's got to be someone who can help me with this. There's got to be someone who can talk to me about what I'm going through. There's somebody who can look at what I'm doing and give me another set of eyes. And so you're probably going to need that going in 2025 because it's October, and before you know it, it'll be Christmas time, and then it'll be January, and then it'll be next June, and then it will be December. And it's interesting. It's the same as like, there's a acumen and accumulation are not that much different. That was quotable. Damn, Race, write that down. That was pretty good. Acumen and accumulation are that quite different. That's pretty good. Keep that somewhere. I'm gonna put that in a book.
Just so you guys know, that's gonna be printed up and put on the wall somewhere in the office.
When you walk into a seminar, you're gonna have like a big sign that says acumen and accumulation are not that different. It's funny. What I mean by that is this. When you start to accumulate, right? So let's just say that you said, I'm going to put $1,000 a month aside, and then and then it's a $2,000 or $5,000 or whatever. It's like a whole life policy. And I'm not here to sell whole life, okay? Don't go down that road. But if you had a whole life policy, you'd pay the premium every month. One day you wake up, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Just sitting there in an account, never going down, always going up every year. If you start putting money in a portfolio and you get compound interest, and all of a sudden that portfolio keeps going up every year, you just, but what you start to think is, I need $1 million or whatever the number is, right? And your first thought is, oh my gosh, how am I getting $1 million? But it's like, no, I just need to put an extra, for now, 1,000, and then maybe it's 3,000, and then and then you whittle, and then eventually you wake up and you go, damn, I got 48,000. Holy crap, I got 126,000. I have $300,000. I have $428,000. Oh my gosh, my taxes are less than I thought they were going to be, and I have another $112,000 sitting there. And then before you know it, you wake up and you're like, man, I accumulated $1 million, and now I'm getting $50,000 in interest a year, and then it keeps starting compounding. And so now, if at some point you said to yourself, well, I'm not going to do that anymore because I'm just going to let my money naturally accumulate. It's just going to magically just grow. It won't, right? You got to continue to feed the faucet. You got to keep putting money in. You got to keep, right? We call it dollar cost averaging and investing, right? We got to keep doing that. Well, accumulation of money and acumen are the same way. And the fact of like, acumen is about accumulation, is that, when people tell me they learn from me through osmosis, I tell them, no, it's repetition and immersion. And what I mean by that is you start to accumulate acumen. It's not a binder. By the way, that binder's in your basement or wherever else. It's not in some podcast once upon a time. It's you start to accumulate acumen over time, and you start to get a little bit more acumen, a little more acumen, a little more acumen, a little more acumen. You start to layer it, and then you start to bring in concepts, and you start to merge concepts, and you bring in more acumen. Then you get around people who are really bright when it comes to business and finance, and then you start to add that, and then add that, and then add that, and then add that. And it doesn't happen overnight. Like, you can't go to a one-day seminar and all of a sudden be like, now I'm the greatest business guru that's ever lived, plus I have ChatGPT, so I'm good. It's so funny because I had a client recently who was like, I looked this up in ChatGPT. I was like, do not follow that advice. So it's one of these things where it's like, when you start to accumulate, you won't see the acumen increase in a month. It might not be 6 months, but if you continue to increase your acumen over a decade, you'll be in a completely different place as somebody else. So you'll be living in a different world as them. Like, you'll have so much experience and things and knowledge and things you can grasp onto or hold on to that nobody else will ever have. Going back to our topic of the podcast again, more success brings more problems. Well, no, you just haven't gained the acumen to learn how to grow without creating more problems. So what it means is you need to increase your acumen because there's some things you're missing. The problem isn't within the problem itself. The problem is the way we identify the problem and the solutions to overcome it. You have to be able to look at it and say, listen, I'm going to increase over time my acumen around scalability, around delegating, around these types of things. And then that way, when the problem pops up, I will quickly and easily go to the solution.
As you grow and scale, you're going to be presented with new challenges, but you got to welcome the challenges. I mean, you got to start looking in the aspect of, okay, so I'm going to be challenged on something different that I've never been challenged on before. Don't be afraid by the challenge. Obviously, do your acumen, you're studying ahead of time. One of the things that I'm always doing is reading. I'm watching podcasts. I'm listening to videos and tutorials and all of these things to make sure we level up. And, when we create, the Deloitte of the medical industry, we're end up in a place where, I can actually help the team grow and scale. So I think when you look at those things, you don't look at them out of, being scared that those things will happen. You just need to look at it as a challenge. And I think, I love when we go into mindset on these podcasts. I think a lot of times we get into some numbers and financials and all of these things. And, when I get feedback from a lot of the clients are like, man, I really like that podcast on mindset. And these was exactly what I needed to hear, those type of things. So, this has been a good one.
No flip-flops. Kill the flip-flops. We're just letting you guys know. No crusty feet. You better get one heck of a pedicure before you wear them crusty old feet out there. No one wants to see your feet.
So are you like, what is it? You can't wear white after Labor Day? Are you like the same thing? Can't wear flip-flops after Labor Day?
Here's the thing. I'm ending on this. Like, look, nobody wants to see your crusty feet. Like, I'm letting you know. Or if you are like put like a good, like, there's some nice, anyhow.
There's some nice sandals. There's some
right.
Nice
Get you some nice sandals or something.
Treat yourself.
Dress those feet up. If you go put them out and for the public to see, dress them up. Quit wearing your $40 flip-flops that you got at Target or something. Go out. Don't say, well, I got some Alakais. Okay, it's still a dirty flip-flop. Go invest in like a nice sandal or something. You're going to do that because at least then you can wear some like nice pants or something. But shorts and crusty feet flip-flops, man, it's got to go. It's 2025. Going 2025, we say no to the flip-flop. I'm just telling you, like, kill it.
No to the flip-flop, yes to the nice sandal. Go get you some nice sandals.
Go get you some nice sandals. All right. Anyhow, good to see you guys.
Great to have you. Like, subscribe, share. We're going to post this on our social media. Keep the trend going. Give us your feedback. Flip-flops or no flip-flops. Any challenges you guys need help with, we're always here to help you. So like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time.